This is 1059 The Region, where parents talk and explore practical, proactive, and evidence-based solutions. This is Where Parents Talk with Lianne Castelino.
Welcome to Where Parents Talk. My name is Lianne Castelino. Our guests today are parents whose youngest child was diagnosed with cancer. Carlo Colaiacovo is a former NHL defenseman who spent almost 15 seasons playing for 5 NHL teams. He's currently the co-host of a radio show on TSN 1050. His wife, Gina, is a high school teacher. They're the parents of 2 young children. Carlo and Gina Colaiacovo join us today from their home in Oakville, Ontario. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, Lianne.
Thank you.
I'd like to start by asking you what the last few months have been like since June of 2022, when your son Leo finally completed his chemotherapy treatments.
You want to answer this together? Or?
You know what? We've been so grateful that the last few months have just been so normal, so focused on, kids being in school and the weather, and just so typical for us. And we've been waiting a long time for that. So it's been really nice to kind of come out of survival mode and get back to life as we kind of knew it. It's been really normal for a couple of years, even though Leo's treatment went for so long. But once he hit a maintenance phase, things got really, they felt a lot more normal because there was less visits to the hospital, less pokes and less visits and less everything. It just seemed to be more normal for us. So we've kind of been in that stage for a while, which has been nice. But since he finished treatment, not having to worry about giving medicine every night has been, it's been so amazing.
Yeah. And just to, elaborate a little bit on what she said, it's been a celebration for us because for 3 years, and adding the pandemic to that, there was a lot of tense moments, a lot of stress, a lot of uneasiness, with us because the pandemic heightened things around him and his health. So just being able to persevere through that and overcome all that with flying colors and being able to just enjoy everything that life has to offer, not just for us, but for us as a family and him as a kid, most importantly. I think that's been the real excitement that we've been able to share these last couple months, just being a kid again for him, playing with his friends normally, going to public places, participating in sports again. It's been a big celebration for us.
That's wonderful to hear. Let's go back a little bit. Leo is almost 6 years old now, and he was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia when he was just 2 years old. It's a type of blood cancer, also called ALL. When you look back on that moment, being given that diagnosis, what remains with you even now?
I think we both share the same answer to this. I think shock and devastation was the two big things that I think we both felt at the time, because he didn't really show any signs of being really sick at the time. I mean, he was just battling with what normal kids go through. And then, God bless my wife and her motherly instincts. She was adamant to get more answers and took him to McMaster's Children's Hospital, which was a saving grace for us. And after they did more tests, we ended up finding out, which is the news that not every parent wants to hear. But at the moment, at least, we found out what we needed to hear at the time based on what he was dealing with. And to this day, when you think back, it still comes as a shock and obviously a devastation.
Yeah, just walking through the doors of a hospital for any parent is scary. And, when I went there, he had just had a fever. He had a fever a couple times that month, but he was also in daycare. So all kids are in daycare, get fevers and get sick and get colds and stuff. And a few things kind of lined up for us that day. The one walking clinic that I had brought him to a week earlier wasn't open until later that day. My family doctor back in Grimsby was not available until like 5:30. And even then it was like a nurse practitioner. So she wasn't even available. And so on my way to the hospital in Oakville, my mom messaged me. She's like, why not just go to McMaster Children's Hospital and just try and get some answers, just go where it's for kids. So I went straight there, and it's so weird because I can remember every detail up until his diagnosis, up until the doctor first mentioned, like, it could be leukemia. Every single detail is as clear as day in my mind. But after that moment, it's such a blur. I don't know what time Carlo got there. I don't know, who we saw. I don't remember people's names. It was just such a crazy, unexpected, just dreadful day. It was excruciating, actually. And I just remember.
It was hard to digest, really, because we just couldn't believe what they were telling us.
It really was, because Leo was hardly ever sick. Like, he had this cold. He had like a cough maybe back at just before Christmas that year. And so he was never sick. Plus, even at the time, even when he did have a fever and even when he was feeling sick, he was still playing.
Had
and
all the
still,
energy in the world.
Yes. So it was so hard for us to kind of be like, wait a second, and I remember saying to the doctor, this is Leo Colaiacovo. Like, check over the paperwork, check over the blood work. Maybe it got mixed up. Like, look at him. There's no way he has cancer.
Yeah.
So, and then, of course, they tell us that he needs a blood transfusion right away. And we're just beside ourselves. It was for the longest time, we couldn't even still to this day, sometimes, I can't even say like Leo when he had leukemia. It's always like Leo, when he went through what he went through. It's so hard to just even say that word when you associate that with your little 2-year-old.
You are listening to Where Parents Talk on 105.9 The Region. We are talking about coping as parents after a child's cancer diagnosis. Our guests today, Gina and Carlo Colaiacovo, whose son was diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 2. The latest statistics show that at least 6 children every single day in Canada will be diagnosed with cancer. And there are more than 10,000 children currently battling the disease in this country. When you recount your story, what do you now know that you wish you knew back then?
Everything about leukemia. Yeah. There was so much. It was a huge, steep learning curve. I feel like when you're a mom, you kind of think about, okay, fevers and coughs and runny noses and, all these little things. Never mind that can lead to a cancer diagnosis. And then all of a sudden, nothing. And so trying to absorb everything the doctors were telling us, learning about different medications and their side effects and all this kind of thing. It was so overwhelming, so overwhelming.
How did you go about navigating this new reality in those early days?
Well, it took some time, because we had to really digest everything, and you really found it hard to just communicate at the time because your heart is in your stomach. And I believe that, with each day, with more information that we were being given and more that we were finding out about his diagnosis, it really just took time for us to come to a realization and a settlement once we had all the information on what life was going to be for him and for us moving forward. And once we got all the information, it's almost like we looked at each other and we said, okay, this is our new normal. We're going to take it on and we're going to beat the crap out of it. And we're going to do whatever we need to do to get Leo healthy again. And I must say, like, me and my wife have known each other a long time. And I always knew she had a great heart. And I always knew that she was going to be a great mother. But just watching her embrace this and take it on upon her to know every little detail and take upon the responsibility that was needed on a day-to-day basis to make sure my son was getting everything he needed and just our family was getting everything we needed is why she's the person that she is. And she's an unbelievable person, an unbelievable mother. And one day my son will learn to appreciate that because she really is the reason why he was able to get through this. Because as a 2-year-old kid, him being latched on to his mom the way that he was, I mean, it's hard to communicate with a 2-year-old kid and just the way we accepted the responsibility, but the way she basically revolved her whole life around this new responsibility is something that I'm very grateful for, and we're both very grateful for, because we are where we are today because of her.
Thank you. I definitely felt like I just kind of dropped everything. But I know, like in the beginning, I remember looking down at my body after the nurse had talked to us, and I walked out of the room with her, and I was just walking down the hall, and I remember like looking down at my body and like touching my legs, being like, oh my gosh, she was talking to me. Like, this is about my kid. And every time I had that kind of out of body nightmare experience or feeling, it just like hit home all over again, what we were about to embark on, like what we were just about to start, and just filled me with like so much dread all over again.
In the beginning, it's a lot of information to process. It's a lot to absorb. But I think the way we approached it, and like we approached it completely differently from the first 7 days till the next 7 days, because within the next 7 days, once we figured out what the plan was, we basically said, all right, this isn't what we wanted, but this is what we were given, and we're going to take it one day at a time. One day at a time. Don't focus on the finish line, because hearing 3.5 years of treatment, you're thinking, oh my God, this is forever. But really, when you try to make the focus, when you do make the focus, one day at a time, that's all you really need to focus on, is getting through each day, making it comfortable for everybody during that day and the next day, and just, making sure that with each day you're making progress.
The other part of the story that is so important to talk about is that while you're supporting your son, who needs all of your attention, your love, and your care, you also have another child to tend to. How did you go about supporting your older daughter?
Yeah, Mia was only 4 years old. She was in junior kindergarten, and I'm so thankful. My sister, it was on a Friday night that Leo was diagnosed, and picked her up from school. My sister picked her up from school, took her for the weekend for a 2-night sleepover, and she really had like no idea what was going on. That allowed us to kind of sit with the information, listen to doctors in the first couple of days. And then we were able to come home on the Sunday for a few hours, gather our things, pack a bag, that kind of stuff. We didn't know how long we were going to be in the hospital. And so when we saw her, I think it kind of came over both of us like, oh gosh, like, what are we even going to say to her? She's 4 years old. She doesn't understand.
Yeah.
We've never been more than, I don't think at that time we had even been away for a night from our kids. So we sat her down. Carlo attempted to say something and then just started crying. And I said to her, Mia, we have this, Leo's blood is thick. We talked to the doctors, and they kind of gave us some age appropriate things to say. And we said, Leo's blood is thick. We've actually been at the hospital all weekend, and we've been talking to doctors, and they're going to give him medicine to make him feel better. And I said, but we do have to go back to the hospital, and we have to be there for a few days. And, my mom was going to stay with her. And she turned to us and she said, I will never forget. She said, I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to be the best big sister. And I think in that moment, both of our hearts, grew exponentially. But also just kind of relaxed a bit, like, oh my gosh, we've done such a good job with her for 4 years that she's able to say something like that, to come to that kind of conclusion when we, spring this news on her. We tried to involve her as much as we can after that. She came to visit at the hospital almost every day, or whenever it was, okay for her to come on good days, that kind of thing. But before the pandemic, we were able to bring her to every clinic appointment. So I tried to involve her as much as I could. We had to also be there early, so we wouldn't have been able to get her to school on time. So she just stayed with us for appointments. She played with Leo at the clinic, so that she felt involved and felt part of whatever he was going through too. And so at the same time as he was getting attention, she was also getting some attention too. I'd go in the room with the doctor and Leo, and Mia would stay and play with my mom, my sister, my dad, Carlo. So whoever was kind of there, I think we all took on the responsibility of making sure that Mia never felt left out.
We struggled with that scenario in the beginning. We were like, how are we going to, make Mia understand? And I think once the conversation was had with her and, nothing really changed, it kind of went a lot smoother than we expected. It allowed us to sort of start coming to the realization of what our life was going to be like, and everybody was going to be involved in, in their own roles, whatever that may have been. And I think the one thing that we are extremely blessed for is having great family around us, because honestly, like, whew.
Definitely couldn't have done it without any of them.
It's time for a short break. More of Where Parents Talk in a moment. Stay with us.
Want to learn more about the show? Email info@whereparentstalk.com. Stick around. Lianne Castelino and Where Parents Talk will be right back on 1059 The Region. Welcome back to Where Parents Talk. Listen live at 1059theregion.com. Here's Lianne Castelino.
Welcome back. We are talking about childhood cancer. Every day in Canada, 6 children will be diagnosed with cancer. Our guests, Gina and Carlo Colaiacovo, lived that stark reality 3 years ago when their youngest child was diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 2. Before the break, we were talking about how fortunate you both feel for the support you received from family and friends as you grappled with your son's diagnosis and treatment. What could you offer to parents listening or watching who may be living a similar reality of being told their child has cancer?
I think in our situation, the difficulty in the beginning when we first found out is we wanted to let family know, but it was hard because my twin brother was not around. He was on vacation, and we didn't want word to get back to him or get to him while he was on vacation, because we didn't want to create a sense of panic.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but also being on the radio, we had family calling, like, why isn't Carlo at
right.
work? What's going on? There hasn't been said anything.
So a good week, it was holding the information within people close to us. And that was the toughest part, because I believe we felt a lot better when we were able to share our story. Like, once we got all the information and we started talking about it, I think it helped us start the process of rehabbing and the process of healing, because we knew what we were dealing with. We knew that he had a positive diagnosis, and we felt like the more we shared, the stronger we became, because our support unit or support team around us just grew even stronger. And when we started to share our stories, now more people are reaching out and sharing some of their own personal experiences and some of the positive outcomes that they come and some of the battles that they had to deal with. So it kind of helped us prepare a little bit more for what we didn't know we were going to deal with. So the advice I can give, and I'm not sure she feels the same way, is if you feel comfortable, share your story. Share your story, because there's like you mentioned before, there's so many people out there that either have been through it or know somebody that's been through it, and talking and sharing advice or certain experience can be really healing. And the other advice that we had for each other was nothing else in the world matters. Mm-hmm. What matters is the health of our son and making sure he gets everything he needs on a daily basis to be happy, to be comfortable, because the happier he was, the more comfortable he was, the more happy and more comfortable that we were. And so that helped us get through every day too, even though it was challenging, and a lot of it was challenging for my wife, because she took on the responsibility of the everyday comforting, the everyday medications, the talking to the doctors, and that's she deserves an award for that. She really does. But we were only allowed to do all this because we allowed it to happen. We allowed people to share our story. We allowed people to come into our family, and we took a day by day approach with it, and we said nothing was going to get in our way. So that's the advice I can give people: is take one day at a time and only focus on the things you need to do on a daily basis to make everybody around you comfortable.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that advice. I think in our case too, though, is that we totally just let Leo lead the way. And we were also so grateful. I know that this is not everybody's experience. We didn't really have a lot of setbacks, and there weren't any real complications with Leo's diagnosis or treatment. So he did like laugh every day and smile every day and play every day. So for us, that, I mean, how do you, I guess my advice would be to kind of let your child lead the way. And on good days, you embrace those good times. On harder days, you know, sit, drop everything, sit with your child. And I feel like that kind of goes for like any illness, you know, it doesn't have to be just because your kid has cancer. But I think that's important for us as parents, that we have to remember we're raising these little humans. And when they come to times that are scary or, you know, uncertain or going through things that aren't their friends aren't going through, we have to kind of lead the way. In our case, though, Leo led the way for us, you know, so I feel like he deserves the award. If anyone's going to get an award, he, I feel like he kind of made that part easy for us, you know, to share what was going on. We were able to share lots of happy things. Or maybe I just turned a blind eye. I don't know.
Well, no, even to this day, like he's completed his treatment. He's thriving in life. And I still get people asking me, how's your son doing? How's your son doing? And I feel ecstatic as a parent to say that he's doing amazing. Right. And, you know, we feel like we're blessed in that way because we did have a positive outcome with him. But, you know, in any cases, even though you are given, you know, a positive outlook in the beginning, you're not sure what type of challenges you're going to be dealt with throughout the path. So she said it best, let him lead the way.
Your son endured more than 3 years of treatments, more than 1,000 doses of chemotherapy. Can you paint a picture for us of what a typical day or a typical week looked like for your family during this time?
I don't think we could have considered any day like typical. Every day was so different. In the first 8 months, there were lots of visits to McMaster Children's Hospital. There were different stages. The first 28 days, he was on a steroid that by week 2, I think by the time we got home after 2 weeks, he was so miserable. And he was, you know, putting on weight, and we were making like bacon and eggs and sausages at like 3 a.m. a few times.
I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning one time, make him a plate of pasta. It was just
so what he wanted,
demanding food. But, you know, that's what the drug does. Right?
Yeah. And then, you know, the second month was a different medication. The third month, third and fourth together were different medications. So in all, like it was just so different. We had to keep a very detailed calendar of what medications he needed and when, and some were just for 5 days and some were 3 times a day. And it was so confusing, but we just tried to stay as organized as possible. Thank goodness for our awesome nurse, Joanne at McMaster, who really just kind of took us under her wing, and she made sure that we stayed on track. And there's just so many medications, so many appointments.
One of the great traits that my wife has is how organized she is when it comes to perfection too. And every month when we were given a new schedule, she would spend hours coming home and just creating her own schedule of stuff she needed to do, because he needed medication twice a day?
Some twice a day, yes. Some 3 times, once a week. And it
was all through an NG tube, right? So it was a liquid that she had to learn how to use a syringe, wear gloves, take certain measurements. And people would ask all the time, you know, he had to almost 2 years wearing an NG tube. Mm-hmm. And they would ask, like, is that for feeding? And luckily for us, he never, ever once stopped eating. And you can just imagine the challenges of a kid who's getting chemo, a young kid not eating. Right now, you're dealing with different challenges too. The NG tube was strictly for medication. And it was just because so that we wouldn't have to fight him every day to give him the medication, because that was a challenge too as a 2-year-old kid. You know, try to giving him medication that doesn't taste well and that he doesn't like, right? But the NG tube created a sense of sort of calm for us, knowing that, okay, we don't have to fight him with it. We can just, or she doesn't have to fight him with it. She can just give it to him when he needs to get it, which was every day. Every day for 3 years, he needed a dose of chemo in him. And once the tube was removed, we were able to get a pill and go pill form. And there was a lot of bribing and a lot of conversation around the benefit, trying to get him to move away from the tube, because we wanted, like, the thing about him being a kid is that he's very playful with a lot of other kids. Him wearing a tube, there's always, the concern of it popping out and then having to go to another hospital visit and stuff like that, where the pill, it's just, it's orally and he gets to take it. And I felt like that was the final hurdle for us in his chemo stages. Once he was able to start going pill form, it was like he was a kid again, and like a full kid again, and you would never know. And I think the other difficulty for us with him was just the changes we saw in him from day one to day, 365 in the first year. Because, he's losing his hair, he's putting on weight, you're seeing the physical changes. That's hard. That's hard as a parent to see your kid go through that. But, you stay on track, you stay prepared, you stay on schedule, like my wife was with him with his medications, and it takes care of itself. And ultimately, through time, through effort, through sacrifice, you find a way to get through it. It's hard to believe when we look back and you say to yourself, holy cow, I can't believe we did that for 3 years. And, you never want to say the pandemic was a blessing, but for us, it really was, in the sense that we didn't have to make an excuse not to go any places, because obviously the risk with his health, we limited ourselves from any, public events, any, family outings, because we were just primarily focused on making sure that he was in the right health situation every time.
Gina and Carlo, what would you say that each of you learned about the other as parents as you were moving along this journey?
I learned how strong my wife is. Mm-hmm. And, I can't imagine any parent, let alone a mother with 2 young kids, having to go through the struggles that, she had to go through, not just physically, but emotionally. The strength that she showed, knowing that she was going to take this full on and she was going to make sure that he beat this thing. And it's really hard to describe, but honestly, I don't think if we had each other, we wouldn't be able to go through it.
It was so hard to first say the words to Carlo, like, you need to come to the hospital. And then when I saw him come in and, tears in his eyes, of course, in that moment, you kind of you just have to lean on each other, and you really don't have a choice of, what the next step is. And so you go through it together and you learn together. I'm very grateful that I was off from my job as a teacher and that Carlo was able to continue to work for us and do what he loves, because we also love watching him do stuff he loves. We're still here. We're still doing the same job. And we're at least, back to kind of our normal lives too.
Gina and Carlo Colaiacovo, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Thank
you. Really
appreciate
it.
And that is this edition of Where Parents Talk. You can catch the podcast version on one of more than 50 different podcast platforms. I'm Lianne Castelino. Thanks for listening. Hope you'll join us next time.
Sign up for Lianne's parenting newsletter and so much more at whereparentstalk.com. This is Where Parents Talk on 105.9 The Region.